Welcome to another episode of the Impossible Life Podcast. I'm your co-host, Nick Surface, and I'm looking across at a man who was recently declined employment in Santa's workshop because under special skills he listed violence and aggression. That's right, friends, the former Navy SEAL, Garrett Unkelbach, a man who never met a challenge that wasn't solved by a punch to the throat.
You know, what you don't know is that people all over the world are trying to penetrate Santa's workshop, and someone has to run security.
Is that what you... So you got fired?
I was publicly declined, but privately.
Oh, yeah. Oh, okay, wait. Now you have the real story here. I'm glad to see that Santa will be safe again. In my continuing quest to give a little bit of truth in all of our intros, you'll know that Garrett really genuinely believes in his special aggression and violence giftings from the Lord. And he lists those often as having, I have an exceptional gift there. And I always find it amusing because I've never met anybody else in my life who's listed those as gifts.
Well, not everyone knows the way that God made them. I know the way that God made me, and God has shown me how to use those things. So I like to talk about that.
Well, hallelujah. All right, today's episode is on culture, and it's a doozy. Culture is something that you have experienced in your business, and you're experiencing it in your life right now, whether you know it or not, because everybody has a culture in their life, and we're going to get into that more, but this is a massive one. If you know how to affect the culture, you can literally change, I would say, the direction of your whole life, your whole business. If you're a business owner, you're going to love this. If you're not a business owner, you're going to love this. Is that fair, G?
Culture impacts everyone.
It really does.
That's one of those, it's like philosophy. It's like, I don't believe in philosophy. I don't have a philosophy. We all have a philosophy. Everyone has a culture.
Yeah, it's like gravity, right?
No, I don't know.
I just felt like putting that in there.
I wouldn't quite, Let me make the metaphors.
Okay. Garrett's been especially surly. There was an exchange before we pressed record that, he was especially difficult. I'll just say that. You'll never know what was said, but I will tell you.
Honestly, when am I not?
No, you're literally every episode we've ever done. Like, as soon as we get ready to press record.
Just get used to it.
I am
Get
used
with
to
the program, Nick.
I'm with the program, bro. I'm just letting everybody know, okay? Anyways, former CEO of Zappos, Tony Heisch, which, Tony. Tony's actually very well known, grew the company, massively changed online retail and the sale of shoes.
He's considered a visionary.
He really
in the
is.
way that he was. He saw things different than other people.
Yeah, got his company acquired for a massive sum by Amazon. Well, what he said about bad hires is he said in his company, which Zappos is known for having great company culture, and he said bad hires have cost us over $100 million.
You'd think that's like, they must have been a horrible company. No, that's really because of the way that Tony was. He knew to the dollar what having the wrong team cost him.
Yeah, and what's even crazier is that, like I said, their culture was studied. Like, you can go in and read business journals and different things that went in and studied what they did to create amazing culture, and he's saying it cost them $100 million.
Tony famously said, or I don't know how famous you want to call it, but one of the most significant things he said, and I can't remember the name of his book, but he has a great book. He said the 3 things as a business that no one can take from you, right? And so a lot of people are like, man, how do I protect my business? And there's so much competition in the market and all of those things. Tony said there's 3 things no one can take away from you. Not your product, not any of the, like, people can literally steal from you. The things that no one can steal from you is your brand, your culture, and your pipeline.
I believe you're talking about the 2010 release, Delivering Happiness, G. That was his book.
That's the one.
Yeah, well, I'll be here all day. Sure to tip your waitress. Now, here's the thing that's interesting. The U.S. Department of Labor...
Are you going to start flipping the tip iPad around to me every time you...
Yeah, you should. You should tip me for being on here with you. Actually, that's a great idea. I'm going to have to set up a stripe. Anyways,
you should pay me.
No, I really should, man. I'm paying with emotional damage. But the U.S. Department of Labor estimates that a bad hire will cost 30% of the person's salary. Now, that's just the salary for the bad hire, and that works out to be an average of $14,900. What recruiters actually estimate is that it's $240,000 per bad hire because of the amount of time it takes from all the people that are onboarding them and then obviously getting them out the door, that it actually works out to be a lot more than just their salary.
This isn't a direct culture example, but this is an example of the cost of the wrong team, right? And that's what, the wrong team creates wrong culture, which has significant costs. When I was in Hell Week in SEAL training, you have 6 people underneath a boat, the Zodiacs, that weigh a few hundred pounds that you're running around with on your head. Yeah. And they were pushing us really hard in this evolution called base tour. Right, where you do about 40 miles of just like sprints all night. It's brutal. Yeah. And there were 6 of us in the boat crew, and we had this one guy who was just like really, he was hurting. He was dogging. He was holding us back. And I actually kicked him. We kicked him out of our boat crew.
You quite literally kicked him.
I did. And the instructors sternly told me not to do that. They said, let us do our jobs, but we also never saw this person again. But I say that to say we were doing horrible with 6 of us, and then we went to 5 of us, and we were almost in the front because we didn't realize how hard we had been pushing against him. We're pressing on the gas, and he's pressing on the brakes. And we just took the brakes away, and we took off running.
Right. Yeah, that's a good analogy of it.
And that's where you can say like, well, the cost of a bad hire is the cost of that person's wage. That's actually not true.
Yeah.
Right. It's so much more than that. That one bad, and this is so much more than in a business. But this is again just an example, and we'll relate it to all the different areas in life. But when you have the wrong person on the team, they're literally pumping the brakes on whatever you do and counteracting. Right. They have their own plan. They have their own vision. They disagree with you. They don't like your plan, and they're not only like just wasting your money and what you pay them, but they're undermining everything that you do. And you would think people don't think they're even that malicious in what they do, but when you don't align with the attitude, when you don't align with the vision, when you don't align with the values and the standards of an organization, you're directly against it. And by the way, the Bible, Christ also talks about this in the way that the kingdom of God is, right? You are either a part of God's kingdom or you violently oppose it.
Right. Yeah.
Right? There is no like, I'm just like a neutral party.
Yeah, there's no Switzerland in the kingdom. Yeah, exactly. Well, gee, so we use that example of culture because I also think that bad cultures will end up to bad hires as well, just like bad hires will make a bad culture. It's kind of like chicken and egg there, and we're going to get more into that.
They both influence each other.
For sure. But I think where most people think of cultures, they see it in the places that they work, but also we see it a lot in sports. And what do they talk about? Like, oh, they've got such a winning culture. So you think about like great dynasty teams. So you think about like the Patriots, Tom Brady, unbeatable kid, who has more rings than any one franchise just on his own. So amazing dynasty there with the Pats. Then you have like the '90s Bulls, amazing dynasties. But guess what? Patriots
90 Chicago Bulls.
Yeah, 90 Chicago Bulls. Yeah, in basketball, obviously
I don't know
amazing.
what accent that was that you used there. But.
Chicago. It was no accent. Maybe I was still stuck in Patriot mode. Who knows? But you look at those teams, 6 championships in the '90s, massive dynasties. But what happened? The Bulls haven't won anything since. They kind of suck now. The Patriots are also doing pretty bad recently. So these things come to an end, and you were actually part of the greatest dynasty ever, which is the Navy SEALs, because you guys just win every year.
The difference between the dynasty I got to be a part of and the dynasties that you mentioned is those were people-specific dynasties.
Right.
They had culture, but that culture revolved around a specific
Right.
person. And when those people left, the culture changed.
That's most companies.
Right? It is most companies. And a great culture, like the greatest form of culture, they start with leaders and visionaries, but that they become so impactful and so solidified that after that leader leaves, that the culture can stay the same. Because that's the difference. And this is also just to that wasn't even the point, but to connect this back to the Kingdom podcast, right? If you haven't listened to that episode, go back and listen to that one. It's a great one. But this is the way that God's called us to be as disciples, right? You would think this isn't related to culture, but it is. This is the way God's called us to be as disciples, that we can go on and receive his message. And I believe it's John 3, I don't remember the verse, where Jesus says, the student is not greater than the master,
Right.
but the student can do everything the master can do. He's saying that you would be fully my disciple, that you're just like me, and you can go and make other people like me, right? And a great culture isn't surrounded around a person, but that person has influenced people enough that even when they leave, that it continues. That's what Christ did on the earth.
Yeah.
Christ started an incredible culture. That even when he's gone, it continues.
Yeah.
Right. And so the great culture that I got to be a part of is the SEAL teams. And there's been many people who've had a great impact and influence on the SEAL culture, in the same way that there's been men who've had a great influence on what the church is. Right. But they are not the founders of it.
Right.
The SEAL culture is not about any specific person. It's about the purpose that the SEAL teams has and the standards that they have. And the way that they keep their standards is what creates their culture. And they know that they're not there to make people happy. They're not there to create like a great working environment. They're there for a very clear mission. And they say, this is what it takes. Meet the standard or go away. Mm-hmm. And so they are very harsh with their standards because they're very clear on their purpose.
Yeah.
And I can tell you, even with someone like Tony, who's like just about doing good sales on a company, they were very harsh with their standards because they were very clear on their purpose.
Oh, that's good. Now, we're going to come back to that, but before we've been talking about culture and everybody thinks that they have it, let me give you the Garrett Unckelbach. Hold on. No. It's the Garrett Unckelbach definition of culture.
Maybe one day when I'm nicer to Nick, I'll get a different soundbite for my quotes.
So you're lucky it's not worse than that. I know that triggers you a little bit because you're like, it should already be one in the chamber.
It does bother me.
Dead man's gun is what you say. So, this is my way of getting revenge. But his quote for culture, your definition of culture, was the pattern of attitudes and behaviors that are inherent to a group. I'm going to say that again because I want you to really think about this. The pattern, meaning it happens repeatedly, of attitudes and behaviors that are inherent to a group. We're going to get into what this does, but and also where you see it. But what I will say is that you have a culture in your life, and you have a culture in the businesses and places that you go.
And think about attitudes and behaviors, right? You can't really manufacture those.
No.
If you have children, certainly of more the age of your children.
Yeah.
You know, I have a toddler, so that's a little bit different. But as they get a little bit older, you understand that you can't manufacture an attitude within your children. You can only foster one and create one.
Correct.
And let it grow inside of them. You can force certain actions. You can force compliance, but you cannot force a certain attitude. You can only grow an attitude.
Yeah.
And this is how culture is, and it's a pattern of attitudes and behaviors. You know, one person with a bad attitude in your family, one person with a bad attitude in your organization, your business, that may just be someone who doesn't need to be there in much longer, right? But when you have patterns of bad attitudes, patterns of poor behaviors, that's not necessarily, that's a reflection of your culture, which ultimately culture starts with the leader and the visionary within a company, right? So it's actually a reflection of the culture. And what's both positive and negative about culture is that culture is infectious, right? You allow one person with wrong attitudes and behaviors within a company. Again, think about the clear standards or harsh standards from a clear purpose in the SEAL teams, right? If they just allow a few people to violate the standards, well, you know what that does? It changes the standards.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Right? And so people allow certain attitudes and behaviors within their company, and by allowing it, they have changed the standards within their company. They've changed the standards, which has an impact on the purpose of their company.
Yeah, no, big time. And I think the interesting thing about culture is that it's going to determine, I mean, you talked about it, but it's going to determine what grows. I think the greatest analogy for this that we see is like, if I said to you, where do orange trees grow? No one's going to be like, oh yeah, Montana. Man, they're known for orange trees.
Yeah, do you get your children to have a good attitude by sitting down and doing a PowerPoint to them on a positive attitude? No. They develop a positive attitude from the way that you are, the things that you say. Do your actions line up with how you say? How do you treat them? How much time do you spend with them? What do you show them is important in life? It's all of those things that have an impact on your children's attitudes, and it's the same way everywhere else.
Now here's the tough thing about what you just said, G. So I'm saying, okay, orange trees grow in Florida, right? Not in Montana, because why? The conditions are perfect for it.
Yeah.
So now what that inherently implies, both about the company and your own life, is that in the company, okay, you said it starts with the leader, and you're right. But lots of people have a part to play in that. In your life, you are the leader of your life. So if the things that you have in your life, the fruit that's being produced in your life, is a result of the culture/environment that you created in your life. And what does that mean? Well, we said it's a pattern of attitudes and behaviors. So ask yourself this question if you're looking at yourself. What's the repeated attitudes that I have on a day-to-day basis? What are the behaviors that I'm regularly doing? And that's going to tell you what your fruit is. If you're getting up early and you're getting after it, you have a morning routine or whatever time of day that it is that you're there to do personal, intentional growth and development. If you're actively cultivating thinking, mindset, you're listening to this podcast, so I'm hoping this is you, and you're focusing on having a good attitude, I can tell you, you are tilling the ground and creating the right conditions for some good fruit to come in your life. It may not be there yet, but keep tilling. You don't give up on a tree that hasn't grown in a year, right? So don't give up on yourself. The reverse is also true. If you're constantly complaining, if you're like, oh man, it'd be a lot more comfortable to stay in bed today, or oh, I can skip this, or I don't really like to read, insert whatever it may be, I can tell you that you can't be upset when you look around in your life and you're like, man, I don't know why things aren't working out for me. It's fair. At the end of the day, it's fair.
There's a lot more. There's more than the two elements to it, but just to simplify it, it does come back to your purpose and standards within yourself, right? Mm-hmm. That is the culture that you are in the other places that you go to. If you don't have a clear purpose in your own life, if you don't have harsh standards with yourself about your own attitudes and behaviors, you can say all day, I want to have a good culture. I want people to like working for me. Or I want my family to be this way. It doesn't matter what you say. What matters is what you do.
Yeah. And unfortunately, most people have a very default culture in their life. And the same is true in business. There's a lot of people that look at culture as like an afterthought in business. And it's not until it gets really bad that you start going, oh man, we've got a culture problem. It's like, yeah, you've had that for a while, but it's taken this long for you to notice. So, G, let's talk about that. What does a good and bad culture look like in business and personal?
I'll use the SEAL teams as an example.
Okay.
I think there's lots of different things that you could call a good culture. Right. And because they're not all the same, because they have different purposes. Right. But so what are the key things that we can identify about great cultures? I'll use the things that I experienced from the SEAL teams
Yeah,
that would be true in other places. Because just to give you a simple understanding of that, like a great culture for the SEAL teams is not the same as a great culture for a youth ministry.
Right.
Right? Like the culture inside the purposes and standards of the SEAL teams is a little bit different than the purposes and standards of a youth ministry. But what would be the common denominators of a great culture in a youth ministry, right, and a great culture in the SEAL teams? And I'm just using those two as examples because they're about as far from the same as they could be. One of the things that I saw in the SEAL teams is, and this would be, for a business or just from an organizational standpoint, that as many people as possible want to figure out how to do stuff with you.
Yeah.
Right?
Big time.
Here's what you've seen about the SEAL teams, because they have a culture of winning. They have a culture of high performance. It's like so much more than winning. Like they're just being undefeated. They carry a lot of the weight of how America feel. People joke about like America back-to-back World War champs, right? Where the SEAL teams didn't have a part in that, but the SEAL teams carry a lot of that brand of America because of how they fought in wars over the last 20 years. But I say that to say some of the key things that are indicators of a great culture is everyone wants to work with you. Like people that don't even associate with you. When I was in the SEAL teams, you had, the Olympic water polo team, you had Wall Street people, you had all these organizations. Like, how can we come out and just see what you do, be a part of what you do? Disney used to be this way. They've had some missteps in the last couple of years, but that used to be who Disney was.
Yeah, it's down to leadership.
Right? And leadership has had a big impact on that, but their creative culture and how they made customers feel and stuff, they still kill it in customer service, just honest, even though they've had some missteps, the way that they treat customers in the park, they're still stellar in that, and that's a part of their culture that people say, man, what we need to learn from those guys. We want to be a part of them. So that's one of the first things. If you have great culture, not just like do clients want to purchase from you, right? And I don't just mean that, but everyone wants to figure out how can I work with you? Like I just want to do anything with you, and they can be in a completely different industry.
Yeah.
One of the indicators of a great culture is good people stay, right? So you think about like in a business or in a family, that good people would stay. In your business, like the right people stay. Like they're not trying to go anywhere else, even if they get offered more money. And because there's things that are so much more important than money. If you love the work that you do, if you love the people you work with, if you have a great sense of purpose and significance in your job, you know what you're going to do? You're going to stay right there, right? And the flip side of that is true as well. If you have a bad culture, nobody wants to work for you. Man, you got to pay me a lot to be here. I'm trying to find the next place. Like this is just a job until I can find a better thing, right? And the same on with the first point I made. When you have a bad culture, nobody wants to work with. They only purchase from you because they have to,
right?
And no one's trying to figure out how to partner with you.
What's interesting about you saying about the good people stay? I immediately went to like jobs for life and that whole thing. That is definitely not part of our generation, but was a part of our parents' generation for a little while. And it wasn't until the 80s that they started doing mass layoffs because of stock-driven companies, right?
And that's we're going to come back to that, just that whole category on the podcast. It's some content that I've wanted to share for a long time, and I know you know that, Nick. I'm just sharing it with the audience. Culture did change in America, right? Corporate culture changed across businesses, and it changed all the way down to the employee level. We'll get into all that stuff.
I just wanted to make that note because I think it's an interesting shift where you talk about good people stay, because that used to be the norm, and now it's very rare.
Well, and businesses used to say, where can we add value? What is our purpose as an organization? And most of those businesses usually had two key purposes. What's the product or people that we serve? And one of the people that they felt like they served was their employees.
Yeah, big time. All right, G, what else do we have for good business culture?
So everyone wants to align with you. They want to figure out how to work with you. Good people stay, and by the way, also in a good culture, the wrong people leave.
Right. Oh yeah.
Right. When you have clear purpose and harsh standards, people who have the bad attitudes, they feel out of place.
Yeah.
Right. If people have a negative attitude and feel welcome at your business, that's actually a reflection of you, not a reflection of them. Right. Great culture pushes the wrong people away and attracts all the right people. If you're a company that's like, man, we need better talent. If you have great culture, you attract high talent. Right? If you don't have great culture, you're like, man, well, why do we have to pay more to get talented people to work here?
Yeah.
This is also the same. I think this is the same in a family. When you have a great culture as a family, your kids want to stay.
Yeah.
You're like, I don't mean stay in your home. That's not what we want, but that they want to stay a part of your family.
Yeah.
That they're not like, I want to move off to a different part of the country, do my own thing, not be around. Right? When you have a great culture as a family, your children and your grandchildren want to participate in that family and in that family culture. So the next thing, integrate culture, people reach their greatest potential. right? In a culture where, hey, we have a very clear mission. We know who we are. We know who we want to be. We also have we attract great talent, and we have a process for developing talent. Great culture is a healthy place, right? Just like you talked about with the orange groves. Great culture helps people grow and become their best. If you have an organization where everyone is stifled, where no one's growing to their next level, that's also a reflection of a poor culture. Same within a family, same within any type of an organization. Culture is not something that's only within business. Culture is any type of group, team, or organization, right, including a family.
Yeah, I mean, the same way that an orange tree, you expect it to keep growing, right? If it's got everything that it needs, you expect it to grow. And when it's dying, what do you say? Oh, man, something's wrong. Same thing in your business. If people aren't reaching their potential, then you got a problem. Because people should be growing and feeling the opportunity and the environment is right for them to express all their best strengths and to be part of that team.
A healthy tree produces fruit and has deep roots.
Yeah.
Right? If it's bad soil, that tree is producing rotten fruit, and that tree is not well planted.
Yeah.
Right? Last thing, and these are just some of the key ones, right? These are things that you would see in a great culture in a military program and a great culture in a youth ministry. Two very different organizations, but these are the key things that you would see in both great cultures. Last thing is there's a deep sense of fulfillment. I kind of mentioned this one before, but when you have a clear purpose, the people who are there, and we're going to talk about, man, how could you, some of these things kind of start to seem like very, very grand, and like, how could you actually have a place that creates all of these things? We're going to talk about that here in just a second. But when you have a great culture, when you have a healthy culture, people in your organization, people in your family, people on your team, they feel so fulfilled. Mm-hmm. And that's part of the reason great talent wants to stay. That's part of the reason that people grow and become healthy, because they say, man, I want to be a part of this place. What we're doing here is special. Yeah. What we're doing here isn't just about making a dollar. What we're doing here isn't being somebody's slave. What we're doing here matters. People, like the job in the military, especially the SEAL teams, you're not paid appropriately for the risks that you take and the level of work performance that you get to. Some of the most elite individuals on the planet in the SEAL teams risking their lives for a job. And, you can make a little bit more than this if you stay longer. But my last year in the SEAL teams, I think with like all my special pays and everything, this is way more than basic pay. But if you look at all the special pays and some of the tax-free pay, I think I made like $92,000 my last year in the Navy.
Your life's worth a little more than that.
Yeah.
Now, a key point.
If you get a jersey in the NFL, you make $450,000 that year.
Well, I think you make more than that now.
Yeah,
I think
whatever
are like $650. But just to say about that, so if you're a business owner and you're listening to that, I hope that inspires you. Or if you're a person who's working for someone else, ask yourself, who wouldn't want to work in a culture like that? Everybody would. Now, we're going to flip this to personal in a second, but I also want to talk about what a bad culture looks like. But we can't do that before a quote from Pastor Keith Kraft, who says, and this is the responsibility of you as a leader in your life, or if you're the leader of the business, listen, people become like the culture they live in. That is why the number one job of a leader is to create a culture by design and not by default. And that's something I don't think a lot of leaders are conscious of, is that the culture is down to them. And like we said, who are you responsible for leading no matter what? Yourself. So I'll go back to what I said before. If you were to start looking at the weather patterns, for lack of a better example, but like the patterns of your attitudes and behaviors, what does your weather look like? Are you looking like you're ripe and ready to grow lots of fruit like down in Florida? Or are you frigid and cold like deep in the Yukon and where it's like nothing's going to grow? I mean, it's picturesque. G, do you want to talk about what a bad business culture looks like first, or do you want to go to a good personal?
I'll kind of just give the flip side of, it's a lot of these are just the opposite, but we'll just talk about it for a second.
Okay.
Bad culture is not only do people not want to align with you, people only purchase from you when they have to. Right. Like this is kind of funny, but this is a lot of government programs.
Yeah, big time.
Right. People only use them. It's funny, SEAL teams are considered part of the government, but a lot of government programs and government businesses, it's poor customer service. It's poor everything. You just use it because you have to, right? This Postal Service is like a good example of
the
that.
DMV is like classic.
The DMV, it's like, I only use this because I have to, right? The last thing, I hate giving these people my money. I don't like having to interact with them at all. I want this to be as short of an experience as possible.
A lot of people feel that way about taxes in general. So I'm not condoning that. I'm just saying.
So that's one part of bad culture, that people don't want to align with you and they only purchase from you when they're forced to, right? Bad culture is not going to be very profitable.
For sure. Yeah.
Second thing is, when you have a bad culture, the opposite of good people staying, the good people leave, right? People that high talent, high capacity people, they don't want to be a part of poor cultures, so they leave. And you know what happens is the wrong people, they stay.
Yep.
Right? And those wrong people, they plant their feet and they push out all the other good people.
Big time. I've worked with a number of businesses, as you know, during my career as a marketing consultant. I can think of some specific examples. And you're exactly right. What happens in those cultures, the bad people see that this is a place where the number one thing, and I didn't even click into place until now as I'm thinking about it, is that the standards are low enough that they know they can get away with a lot, and they identify all the ways to do just enough to stay. And a lot of times these people become really key leaders in these organizations, and because they're just there for some personal reason, they have no intent of purpose other than to serve themselves.
This is not meant to be a political thing, but a lot of companies that have unions also have poor culture because of that, right? There's a me mentality, there's this protection mentality, and there's not a sense of high standards.
Right.
Right. Yeah. All these people and this is many European organizations, right? Because of their firing policy, like there's just no standard.
Yeah, because the purpose becomes about the individual, and the organizational purpose that would call everybody to be more isn't there. It's just like, the purpose of this business is to serve you. And that's
some
never
people
works.
disagree with this, but personally, I don't look at a business as a team, right? Like the SEAL teams are not a family, right? A family, like when you make mistakes, when you're broken, when you're busted, your family is the one that takes you in. Hey, let's get you cleaned up. Let's get you back on the road. Right. A family is meant to be what it is. It's a family. They'll care for you. It's not a performance organization. Businesses have a purpose, right? And they're we are here to accomplish something, right? And so when you call your business, it doesn't mean you can't love the people that you work with, that you can't build up the people that you work with. But think about calling a sport, like what if the NFL called their teams a family? These are our NFL families.
The Cleveland family.
You know, this is Jerry. He used to be a great player, but he's had a drinking problem for the last 12 years.
Can't get rid of it.
We can't get him to change it, but we're just believing the best for him, and he's still on the team, right? There's our drunk wide receiver.
Yeah.
That doesn't make sense.
Nobody would ever expect that.
Right. There's a difference, that families have a different purpose than teams have a different purpose than businesses.
Yeah.
Right. That's a slightly different topic, but I wanted to make that point there.
There was something that went around pretty recently, and I was trying to find it while you were talking about Netflix. Remember I sent it to you?
Yeah.
Where Netflix, they sent something around about how the reason that they're successful is because they're not a family, but they're very much performance-driven, like meritocracy.
That's right. We were talking about that, and you pulled that up for me.
And they said exactly what you just said. They said the reason that we keep being successful is because we know that we want the most creative, performance-driven people possible, and those people stay, and they keep growing.
And you know who likes to come to winning teams?
Winners.
Great players.
Yeah, exactly, man.
So bad culture, in a bad culture, good people leave and bad people stay.
Yep.
These are, you got people who, in a bad culture, you got the worst type of people who quit your company, but they don't leave. They've quit mentally, they've quit emotionally, but they just didn't send in their resignation.
Still take that paycheck, though.
Yep. Yeah. Next, in a bad culture organization or family or team, nobody's reaching their potential.
Yeah.
People are stifled and people go backwards. Mm-hmm. And then lastly, in a bad culture, no one has a sense of fulfillment. Right. People are always like, man, why do we have to do this? What's the point of doing this? Their work seems just laborsome and arduous.
Yeah. Now, I will say that some of the companies I've worked with that have not had great culture are still making money. Right? Like this is not I think a lot of people, they gauge the success of a business solely based off of, oh, well, look, we're growing, we're making money. It's like, yeah, but your sales team hates everybody else. You're having HR issues left, right, and center. That guy over there, no one even knows what he does. And you can just sit there and see all the different breaks in it. But it's like, oh, but we're making money. It's like, yes, you can make money and have a bad culture. And to me, I don't think you're winning, because at some point that comes crashing down.
I remember in the SEAL teams picking up brass.
Right.
And I was like, this is the stupidest thing ever. But I remember it also felt different being a part of a great culture and a great organization.
Right.
It's like, man, this is a dumb task, but I'm doing it with a bunch of people where, it's just, this is a dumb thing that we are doing that I feel like we shouldn't have to do, but I guess we have to do. But it's a part of what we do that's really important. So it's not as big of a deal, and we had fun doing it.
Right. Yeah, I remember that story. All right, G, let's look at this in personal, because there's some overlap, but obviously it's a little bit different. I'm going to kick us off in the personal one. If you have a good culture in your life, and remember we're talking about this, you have a culture in your life. So here you go. Here's an indicator of whether you have a good personal culture. People will want your company, right? And I've said this to people before, and this is a kind of requote of Pastor Keith. I mean, he says you should ask yourself, what do you bring into a friendship? Like he always says, he talks about, like he would say to his kids when they were young, what value do you bring to this family? And people might think that's a harsh question,
Yeah.
but what a great mentality to have about what am I going to bring into this relationship? Because you know what? If you're a person that is fulfilled, you have a sense of purpose, you have a mission in your life, and you're going places, and you're that type of person, guess what? People want to be around you. If they feel like you're going somewhere, people want to be near you. If you bring whatever it may be, your 1%, your joy, your laughter, your happiness, your wisdom, whatever it may be, people will be drawn to you.
People are attracted to your greatness and your purpose.
Yes.
Right. I was joking with Nick before this when we were talking about this. Like other men aren't attracted to me because I'm nice to them.
Oh,
and
100%.
I actually am nice to plenty of people, just not Nick. But I think people, and especially men, are attracted to me because I'm going somewhere, because I have a
Right.
sense of purpose.
Yeah.
And I want to just compare like being nice to some of the wrong thing. And there's nothing wrong with being nice. Being nice is great, but nice just isn't the mission. I want to compare that to like some of the other things that people might call culture.
Right.
Some people think culture is like, we're a cool team here, and we go to movies together
Right.
on the weekends, and,
Yeah.
and we buy pizza for our employees.
Yeah.
Right.
Nailed
Like
it.
that's not what makes people want to be a part of your organization. People aren't attracted to you personally because you're nice. They're not attracted to you personally because you're cool, right? You can initially be attracted to some of those things, and that's the surface level stuff. But then when you get into really know somebody,
Yeah.
you're really only going to want to know them more and follow them more and be with them more because of their culture. And we'll get to some of what those specific things are that create culture here in a minute.
Well, there goes my plan to get more friends by buying them pizza. So anyways,
You'll get more friend opportunities
by buying them pizza.
by buying them pizza.
Yes.
But I don't know you need to listen to the next part of our podcast if you want to actually convert some of those friend opportunities into friends.
Oh, there you go. Great job. Great segue, man. You're getting good at this. So the next thing is not only do you have people that want your company, but you have deep relationships.
Yeah.
And I will say that not only will you have deep relationships, the shallow ones, the casual conversation, and the people that aren't aligned with where you're going will start to feel so much less interesting. It'll feel a lot more laborious. And that's not an insult to the other people or that you're being snooty or you think you're too good. It's just whenever you have a deep connection with somebody, it's special,
It's
man.
because you've found the things that really matter.
Exactly.
Right? Like I'm not friends with people because we like the same shoes.
Yeah.
Not friends with people because we like the same TV shows. I'm friends with people because we share a purpose.
Yeah.
Right. And that's when you share a purpose with somebody, I don't care what you look like. I don't care what TV shows you like. I mean, it's cool if we watch the same shows so we can joke about it. It's cool if we wear the same shoes so we can match or whatever. But those aren't the things that matter and make me want to stay friends with people. What makes me want to stay friends with people, we believe the same things. We're going in the same direction. We encourage each other about the same stuff. We want to do stuff that matters together.
Yeah. I mean, when we covered alignments on Mindset
Right.
Mastery, I thought that was where we really defined it clearly. And for those of you that aren't in there, be a lot cooler if you were.
Be a lot cooler if you did.
But for those that were in there, I will remind you, for those that weren't, we'll tell you, I mean, all alignments have a shared authority. And for a lot of people, their shared authority is just whatever their preferences are or their softball league. But when you have a shared authority that's agreed on, that's God, and then you have your alignment is connected by shared values, shared vision, shared mission, those are some of the most deeply satisfying relationships you'll ever have in your life because it's about something much bigger than both of you.
Mm-hmm.
You have a clear sense and direction of where you're going and why you're doing what you're doing. So what's going to happen in that? 1 + 1 is going to equal 10 on that one because you got God that's going
Absolutely.
to step in and absolutely multiply those things. And if you haven't experienced that, man, my prayer for you is that you develop a culture in your life that you start to attract those people and you become that type of person that somebody else is going to want to align with so you can experience it because it is one of the most satisfying relationships you can have. I hope that every man is experiencing that in a relationship with his wife if he's married and vice versa. But speaking solely as friendships, it is deeply satisfying.
Let's go to the next one.
Yeah.
When on a personal context, one of the attributes of strong culture is, and this builds right off what we were just talking about, is that there's growth momentum.
Yeah, big time.
Right? Like you're reaching your fullest potential, but also you help others reach their fullest potential. And people who are attracted to you help you reach your fullest potential. That's literally Nick and I's relationship. Like Nick and I have made each other better over the last couple of years. That's a reflection of culture.
Yeah.
And then the last thing is, and we touched on this one as well, is a sense of purpose, right? And I want to say like a sense of purpose in your life. This is about you and this is about the people that you're around. And this is almost just reflective of cultures anywhere, but that you have a sense of purpose, and not just a sense of purpose, but a deep sense of purpose despite any difficulties and challenges you have in your life, right? Because you're not a product of the environment.
Yeah.
You're a product of your culture.
Yes.
I create culture, not what's happening around me makes me who I am.
Yeah. What Garrett just said is such a massive shift. If you're the person, I mean, that's really what the Stoics and everybody that we look at as having this like timeless wisdom, that's what it really boils down to, is that you're the person that's creating the culture inside, so that despite what's going on outside, you can still remain the same, right? It's what a lot of people say, you're the thermostat, not the not the thermometer.
Thermometer.
Right, you're the thermostat, not the thermometer. So you set the temperature. Now the opposite of having a good culture, a good personal culture, a bad personal culture looks like this. People don't want to be around you. Pastor Keith will talk about you're either an energy producer or an energy demander. I think that's such a great way of defining.
My dad and Pastor Keith would both talk about I would hear them say a lot when I was younger. They said there's two types of people.
Yeah.
That either you enter the room and people are like, oh, dang it, he's here.
Right.
Or you enter the room and they're like, oh, yes, Garrett's here.
Yeah.
Right? There's two. That's your culture.
Yeah, a great way to simplify it yet again. So good job. We should just move on. But typically we all know, and hopefully you're not one of these people, but we all know that person that every time you see them, they either need something or there's something that they've got to tell you about because it's so bad, or they have to, oh, I just need to ask you this, or oh, did you hear this? And it's just, they're just sucking the energy out of you.
And that's not always just a reflection of that person. The truth is that your attitudes and behaviors are different than their attitudes
Right.
and behaviors. And that's why you feel the energy drain from certain types of people.
Yeah, and we all have seasons where we're having things like that. I'm
Sure.
not saying you should just keep that inside, but I'm making the example that should also not be your default setting, that you're just constantly in that mode. All right, G, the other thing is because people don't want to be around you, you won't really have deep relationships. You'll have a lot of surface level relationships. You'll have guys that maybe you watch a game with here and there, or people you know from work, but there will be nobody that has that deep relationship with you. I mean, you like to talk about intrusive accountability, and I think that that's something really crucial that people need.
If you go and look at some of these NFL sports teams with great culture, I guarantee, and I've not really studied them or looked at them, but I know this from other things I've experienced and witnessed, is if you go look at some of those teams, those guys have a much deeper level of connection than some of these other team cultures where it's just like, hey man, I come in, I put my cleats on and I put my jersey on and I'm a professional, right? Like I'm just going to do my thing. We don't need to talk. I don't want to know who you are. You just do your job. I'll do mine.
Right. Yeah. You're exactly right. And they cover that type of stuff all the time.
And it's not either that your team is a family, but there is connection, that you know each other and can trust each other. And it's not just like bodies and whatever your sports ball is.
Yeah, that's good. Now, what's the opposite of growth momentum, G, is you are actually regressing, right? Like it's not that you can be neutral. Once again, there's no Switzerland here of just like, oh, I'm just not growing or regressing. It is you are literally have a negative
I think
trajectory.
a lot of people walk through this with certain friend groups that they're in. And
big
they
time.
realize they have an epiphany one day and they realize that my group of friends has the wrong culture, right? And I think one of the first indicators to people in that is they see their friends like their lives are just getting worse.
Yep.
And they're like, man, I need to change.
Yeah, no, that's great. And then you want to take the last one, G?
I think we covered that one, sense of purpose.
Oh, right. Okay. So you have no sense of purpose.
Yeah.
If you have a bad culture in your life, you're going to be very short-sighted. You're focused on either the day or we've talked about this in other podcasts. You're a 5 and 2 person. You don't really feel that there's any sense in what you do. So you spend a lot of your time just trying to get through it. All right. We're going to move on. Now, I suppose the obvious question here, Garrett, is...
we've talked a lot about
culture.
Here's what culture is. Here's how great it is. Here's how bad it is when it's wrong. But how do we actually develop great culture?
Well, we're going to get into that. But, G, one of the things I want to point out, and this is especially relevant for business owners, like culture is not something that I think people realize is a force multiplier. We've just told you that it's going to produce all this stuff. Nobody would say that, hey, I don't need to worry about the sun or the atmosphere if I'm trying to grow fruit.
Again, Tony Heisch, who founded and I believe he sold that company for almost $1 billion, and this was quite a while ago.
Zappos?
Yeah.
Oh, I think he sold it for a lot more than that. I'll find out.
But either way, he was a great founder and knew here's what's essential. Here's what makes my business valuable that no one can take from me. And this is true for any organization, my brand, my culture, and my pipeline. If you don't have a great culture, you do not have a great organization. And if you do not have a great culture, you do not have an organization that's going to last.
Yeah,
that's your family, that's your business, that's any team or organization you're a part of. If you don't have a great culture, it will not last.
Yeah. Now, so you were right. It was 1.2 billion. So well done. But to that point,
and that was 1.2 billion
in 2009.
Yeah, I was going to say almost 20 years ago.
Yeah,
when that was a little bit more money.
Yeah, with inflation, that's like 17 billion. Anyways, no, but so many companies will think of this as an afterthought. You love to quote the Sandy Wheel, who was the Citibank CEO.
Yes, CEO Citigroup, Sandy Wheel. This is not a good one,
Right.
I actually first read this quote in a long HR study that I had read from that Deloitte had published, where the Sandy Wheel said, "What is culture except what's found in yogurt?" He wasn't the CEO very long.
Right. But
Right.
that's how a lot of people think.
And that study that I was reading from Deloitte, it was on how much money is spent to try and create culture and the costs of poor culture. And they went on in that, like, hey, Sandy said this, and also here's how much money that cost them.
Dang. Now, okay, so we're going to get into what makes culture. Because remember, we said culture is a byproduct, right?
Yeah.
it's the byproduct of other forces.
Think like, the attitudes of your children. Culture is a pattern of attitudes and behaviors within a group. You cannot make your children have a certain attitude. You can do the things that help them create a great attitude. Right. So how do we create great culture? Right. You can't manufacture it. You can't do a PowerPoint on it. You can't, point a gun at somebody and say, be this culture. It doesn't work that way. So what are the water, sun, and soil, right? What are the things that you pour into that create a great culture? So let me jump into that. There's 5 major forces that have an impact on your culture. And I won't go deep on these because I can talk about some of these for a very long time. And I will say this is some of my favorite content. This is some stuff that you'll actually hear more from us at The Impossible Life. Vision and purpose are 2 of the things in my life that I love talking about. I think I'll spend the rest of my life talking about vision and purpose.
Yeah. Before you do that, G, I just want to give everybody a quick, if you're working out, if you're driving your car, whatever it is, slap yourself and just take a second to really listen to this. The reason I say that, I've read and studied a lot of business books, personal growth and development. There's lots of rooms that I've been in that I feel very privileged to have been in. I've never heard anybody talk about what Garrett's about to talk about the way he did. This is truly something he's developed. And the first time I heard it was when I was paying him to coach me. I took copious amounts of notes on it because it was mind blowing. So sit up because this is good.
I worked on this with Nick initially, and I work on this. I do this on a basic level with the people that I one-on-one with, which you and I used to do. But I also do this, and I've done this professionally with organizations for large corporations that have paid me, more than the cost of a new Toyota to help them do this. And you and I are at a place now where I want to share this with as many people as possible, and then help some specific people do it in a very unique way.
Yes.
So let's jump into it. Number 1 is vision, right? What is vision, right? A lot of people think that vision is just a picture you have, and vision is like a picture that you want to paint, but it answers some specific questions. The first question is, what do you want? Right? You have to determine what it is that you want in life, but it's not what you want that's about you. It's the things that you want in this world to change, right? One of the ways that I put this for people in my one-on-ones is I say, hey, I'm going to give you a keyboard, a typewriter, and you can write the story of your life. What is the story that you would write if you could control it all, if you could make it happen exactly the way that you want to? And most people, if you actually wrote a book, you might start to write a chapter or 2, and it's like, and I got the mansion and the jet and the island and the yacht. And if I inserted you into that story, you'd feel empty by chapter 2 or by chapter 3. And then you'd have to start thinking about, and this is where I try to drive people to, this is why I love this topic. Then you start to have to answer the question, what is it that I really want to do? What are the things that I want to change in the world? And this is the question beyond what you want. Here's the second question that I give people to think about. There's a lot of questions I have for vision. These are the 2 that I want to talk about today. Is 2, what are the problems that bother you? Right? There's some, and this, it's like the Family Guy quote, what really grinds my gears? Right? We all have some things that grind our gears specifically. Right? And the things that grind your gears aren't necessarily the ones that grind mine. There's things that bother me in the world, though, and have for a long time, and that I'm willing to spend the rest of my life dedicated to serving this cause. And so the vision isn't about the problem. The vision is your solution to the problem. This is literally, for all of us Christ followers, this is how we want to advance the kingdom. Right? The kingdom of God is continually advancing. And so this isn't, how do I want to preserve the kingdom of God? How do I want to maintain it? No, but there's places in the world where the kingdom is not happening. And here's that place that I want to go make kingdom happen. And here's how I'm going to do it. This is what it'll look like. We're all called to advance the kingdom, but where do you want to advance it at? And how do you want to advance it? And this is vision that you need to have for yourself personally and for yourself professionally. But this comes back to some of the questions that that all of us have that are so deep that we struggle with for a long time, we spend all our lives looking for answers in the wrong place.
Yes.
Because the answer to many of your questions is literally the way that God made you and the places that he put you. Right? When I look back at my life, and now I call, hindsight is 20/20. That's what people say.
Yeah.
Right? And if you understand the way that God sees time and God's ability to move through time, he sees backwards and forwards the same.
Yeah.
And now we don't necessarily have the ability to do it the way that God does. But I believe when you have an eternal perspective and you have an eternal context and you begin to see God's purpose for your life, that looking forward doesn't look nearly as hard is not nearly as hard as it used to be. And it starts to feel the same as looking backwards. That when I look backwards, I can see all the dots lining up and I can see the trajectory and I can see the path of purpose moving on in my life. Right? What I'm saying is that where part of your vision comes from, who God made you to be.
Yes.
Pastor Keith says it so great. He says God gave you a unique fingerprint to leave a divine imprint on the world that no one else can leave, right? Your fingerprint's been with you all along, and you're trying to discover where is the place that needs my fingerprint. And my fingerprint isn't for me. My fingerprint is to leave an imprint on the world. And so the vision is the great imprint that you want to leave on the world that no one else can leave. Literally, God made you for some things on the earth. God created you with a purpose to do something that no one else can do. And if you don't want to play your part, it's okay. God will assign it to somebody else. But I don't want to do that. I don't want to be that person in the kingdom, and I don't want to do that to God. I want to be the man for God that I become everything that he wanted me to be. And so that vision is something that's been inside of me. There's two things, and I'll just share a little bit of mine to give a bit of context on it, but I want to keep going because there's a lot to this. So my vision relates to two things, right? It's all about advancing the kingdom. One is that as it relates to men, I want to see men become the men that God has called them to be. The world is full of weak men, and it angers me. Right? It's a problem that really bothers me. One, seeing Christian men who don't act like men, that you would claim God as your father and you don't act like a man. But then also men who are very masculine men and very strong men, but they think that God has no place in their life. And they don't understand that God is actually the author of their purpose, and that the greatest man that they can be is in following God. That's part of my vision. Then part of my vision is around helping people understand how doing business God's way is the most successful you can possibly be, right? You can be all about money. You can follow greed. And I'm not saying it won't work for a time, but eventually, like all of sin, it sours and it's worth nothing. The greatest purpose you can have is in doing business God's way, which will pay you on both sides of eternity, on this side and on the other side. Right? So that's just a little bit on vision. And this is just one of the things that creates your culture. What comes after, this is at the top. And when I work with companies, I spend a lot of time with the CEO on vision because they are the visionaries, right? They're the ones who have to author this. As a family, as a father in a family, you're the visionary. As a team leader or a captain or a coach, you're the visionary. You have to have this vision. And the same for a CEO of a business. But after vision is mission, right? Mission serves the vision. It's one of the ways that you're going to what is a mission, right? We need to go accomplish this thing. Well, if you accomplish this mission, it serves the greater vision.
Yes.
Right? I like to think about how America has a vision of freedom and democracy, right? And let's just put aside any of the corruption that America may have, the military industrial complex and all of that. Let's put those things aside and just talk about America's vision of preserving freedom and democracy throughout the world. Well, then America might have a mission in a certain region in the world to go and stabilize that area, people who are trying to attack freedom and democracy or to help bring freedom and democracy to an area. That'd be a greater mission. And underneath that, there's smaller missions and strategies that help bring stability to that region, right? When the U.S. military first goes into an area, one of those strategies that serves the mission is they're going to kill bad dudes, right? Another one of the strategies is, hey, we're going to make some friends here. We're going to figure out who the good people are, and we're going to help them. We're going to help provide security to them. We're going to rebuild bridges, like physically rebuild bridges, bring in food, bring in good teachers, like do everything we can to help these people. Another way that you do that is develop intel networks. Like I could go on and on in the way that the American missions happen, but it's all these things that serve the mission in that area that serves the greater vision of freedom and democracy throughout the world. So I just used that as an example. You don't have to, even if you don't like America, which I'm sorry if you feel that way, but even if you don't agree with what America does, that's an example of vision and mission, right? And I love the way that, I'm going to be a nerd here for a second. I love the way that Tesla, that Elon Musk specifically authored the vision and mission of Tesla. Now, he didn't found that company, but when he purchased Tesla, he changed the direction of the company, right? They were always an electric car company. But here's Elon Musk's vision of for Tesla. What's core about a vision is that it's not about you.
Yeah.
Right.
That's good.
A lot of businesses will have a vision of, my vision is to be number one in our industry, to have the most sales, to grow this much by next year. No one cares about that. No one will bleed for that. No one wants to help support that. And if you're listening to what I'm saying, that sounds a little bit like a bad culture, right?
Big time.
Now, when you have a purpose and a vision that's not about you, this creates some of those things, which are great culture, where people say, man, I want to be a part of that. That's something special. Elon Musk's vision for Tesla was to accelerate the world's transition to renewable energy. That says nothing about electric cars, and it certainly says nothing about profit or market position. Just to be a nerd for a second, if you're into sci-fi, you know what the Sarnag scale is, and this is human civilization's ability to harness the power of its sun.
Right.
There in sci-fi, there's science fiction where civilizations literally build a reactor thing around their sun to gather all of the energy from it, right? The greatest source of energy in our galaxy, we have a giant fusion reactor in the sky.
Right.
We capture less than 1% of 1% of 1% of the energy that comes off the sun. If we wanted to, and this is what Elon Musk is so focused on, if we want to advance as a human civilization and all of that, well, we need to capture more of the greatest source of energy. So in his mindset, what he's so focused on is I want human civilization to move forward, become interstellar, right? And get off of Earth and all of that, go to different galaxies. He says the first thing we need to do is get better at capturing energy. Vision statement to accelerate the world's transition to renewable energy. You know what we need? We need batteries, right? That's what he's thinking. If we're going to absorb all the energy off the sun, we need more batteries. So what is Tesla's mission statement? Okay, now we get a little bit more specific, and the mission serves the vision. The mission statement of Tesla is to create the most compelling electric car of the 21st century, which they've done. Yeah, they've caught a lot of attention. Sure. They made electric cars cool because when he bought Tesla, every electric car company was a geeky Stanford project, a Prius with solar panels on the top that went 30 miles an hour for 100 miles. Right? No one was excited about that. No one thought it was cool. Nobody wanted to do it except nerds, right? And he said, hey, I'm going to make electric cars cool, which he's been very focused on, right? And he's always trying to do stuff that's just cool. Yeah. He said, if I can make electric cars cool, people will buy electric cars. If people buy electric cars run on batteries. If I start having to make a lot of batteries, then I get to do what I really wanted to do, which was move civilization forward and have more. Now he's building the biggest battery factories in the world. So I say that to say that's an example of vision and mission. He didn't say, man, I want to be the richest man in the world. Right. No, he had a grand vision to help as many people. And some people don't like him for politics and all of that. He's the richest man in the world for a reason. He has advanced civilization further than anybody has in the last 30 or 50 years. And history will not forget Elon Musk. And I'm not trying to overly praise him.
You're right.
But what I am saying, and I can talk about Andrew Carnegie and some other people who have had great visions and missions, right? He's an example of someone who had a vision that was something so much bigger than him. Yeah. And then had a mission that said, this is a clear way that this mission serves the vision. So just moving on. And did you want to say anything before I go past vision?
Give you a chance to have a sip of water as well, because that was quite the flow there. But one of the things I will say, what Garrett's talking about, like we said, these are the forces that develop, that make your culture the byproduct that it is. And you can intentionally develop these in your business and in your personal life. I say to Garrett all the time, I'd never come across this until our paths crossed. I've put this in my life, and it is the most impactful. I don't say this lightly. Apart from giving my life back to Jesus, this is the most impactful thing I've done as an adult, truthfully. Because you know what he said right there? The reason that makes it so impactful is when you have a very clear vision for your life, guess what? Your mission selection becomes a lot easier. Elon Musk isn't going to be swayed by hey, you could make really cheap plastic parts and make a lot of money. Yeah. He's like, that's an easy no. Yeah. Well, you turned down billions of dollars? Well, yeah, I did. Why? Because I've got a very clear mission. This is what you say in life. People get thrown off track in life. Why? Because they see a tailwind. They see a faster opportunity. And if you have no vision, any mission that you see that you think might be good, hey, I'll just jump on it.
When you have a much greater long-range destination, you can get really mission focused on here's what I'm supposed to do on the earth, and none of this stuff matters.
And what a sense of purpose you create. We talked about how you have that sense of fulfillment in great companies.
Purpose enhances your focus. And we talked about this before. We did a podcast on focus, right?
Yeah.
Where Warren and Buffett and Bill Gates both said that the key to their success was focus.
Yes.
They knew what they were doing. They had a clear sense of purpose. So 2 of the 5 things that have a big impact on your culture is vision and mission.
Yes.
Right? Those develop your purpose. And the way that we simplified it earlier is purpose and standards, right? So let me talk about some of the more standards side of, and I probably won't go down the mission road today into strategy and tactics just for the sake of time. So I'll just keep going on the 5 forces. Again, so much of this stuff I love to talk about, but the other part of the 5 forces that impact your culture. So we have vision, we have mission, then we have values and principles, right? And I'll talk about them both together. If you're in Mindset Mastery, you've gotten to receive some of our download on principles, which is one of my favorite topics to talk about, because it's really like understanding the creator of the universe and the blueprint that he gave us. A lot of it's in the Bible, and then he gave us the rest of the ability, which is discernment, understanding the word, and the ability to like see his code and his fingerprint on the earth. When you have a clear understanding of what are principles, these are things that are universal, observable, and unchanging. You don't have to like principles. You can argue with principles all day, but until you get in alignment and agree with principles, you will continue to fail. And so many times in life where people don't understand their principles, they'll continue to fail with good intentions, with a positive attitude. It's like, man, I got all the other stuff right.
Yep.
Why is it not working for you? It's principles, right? And a very literal example of poor principles is not, putting seed in the ground at the wrong time, right? Not watering your seed, overwatering your seed or underwatering your seed, or not having sun for your seed, right? Like not having enough sun or too much sun for the foliage that you have. Those are just literal examples of principles, but even in the intangible space, there are principles of leadership. There are principles of relationship. There are principles of communication. And if you get them wrong, you will fail every time, right? But when you get clear on how principles work and you begin to understand them, you start to develop this undefeatable mindset in the world where it's like, hey, I know what works. You can't, you don't have to argue with me. If you want to defeat this, you're going to have to argue with God, because I understand the way that he made the world. So principles are the things that are universal, observable, and unchanging. And there's all types of principles, right? For like Nick and I's business here in the Impossible Life and some of the things that we do, we don't need the principles of aerodynamics, right? If you don't understand lift, thrust, and drag, you're never going to fly a plane. Nick and I don't have to master the principles of lift, thrust, and drag,
thankfully,
right, to get the Impossible Life off the ground.
Right.
But that's again another example of if you don't understand what the principles are that make your business succeed, you will never succeed.
Yeah. A great example where we talked about this recently was when we talked about running. Last year, we ignored some principles we did a lot of things right, but because we ignored principles, we still failed. And
I can tell you, truthfully, and this is, we have all types of listeners here at The Impossible Life, and I'm grateful for every single one of you. But those of you who are business owners who really want to grow, you could pay the annual subscription for Mindset Mastery just to get principles, and it's more than 10 times worth the price. I promise you what you'll take out of it. But that's just talking about Mindset Mastery and the principles. But the other side of principles and the values and principles together create is the compass, right? Vision and mission is the map. When you put you have the picture and then where we're going on the map,
correct,
right? And then values and principles is the compass. There's 2 parts of the compass, right? You need the magnetic attraction, but you also need the needle, right? You need to align the needle to something. And so principles are these things I know what the clear principles are that make my business succeed. It's not that you need to understand every principle, right? If you're a baseball player, you need to know what are the principles for putting a bat on a ball, right? You don't have to be the wisest person to be a great baseball player, right? Even though wisdom will always help you. But the other side of that is values. Values are different than principles. Values are not just moral things. A lot of people's values are moral things, and that's great. But in the same way that you have those things that grind your gears, right? There's a vision identity that God put inside of you. There's also a values identity that God puts in people. There's certain things that matter to you. You and I have talked about this before, Nick, where it's like a sentimental value. You have objects and possessions that's like, man, this means a lot to me. Doesn't necessarily mean a lot to other people, right? One of my values, which is like, when you know what your values are, you know why you're great. Right? People can't copy your values. Nick, one of the values that's very special to me, things that I obsess over, that I never want to pass on this. And one of the things that I know makes me great is excellence. Yeah. Right? Excellence is not a moral issue.
No.
right? You're not like a sinner because you're not excellent, right? You need to serve people well, but just because you don't want to be excellent, it doesn't necessarily make you a sinner. And there's two parts of excellence. I'll probably skip on that right now for the sake of time. But values are things that are unique to you. Values are things that are unique to you, that you're attracted to, the things that make you win, that they can be moral things, but it's again, like excellence, these are the ways that you add value. Right. Yeah. The things that you value are the ways that you add value. So when you know the things that govern outcomes in your business, and then you know the unique ways that you add value to other people, and now you know, again, a vision and mission. This is where I want to go. I want to accelerate the world's transition to renewable energy. I want to create the most compelling electric car of the 21st century. And then you have the values and principles. Hey, here's how I get there. Yeah. Here's my path. And when you know where you're going and you know how to get there, nothing can stop you.
Right.
Right.
And you know what you always, I mean, you describe values as it's what you always must do. And so you've literally given yourself, like you said, you've got your vision and mission, which is your map. And now you've got your compass. It's like, so what do you do whenever you're trying to get where you're going? Well, I know I got to go north 30 miles. So what do? You just keep following that compass. Yeah. And it's a very overly simple example, but what do? How do you know if you're going to be successful? Well, here's the things I value. I know like positive attitude and excellence are two of your values, right? Mm-hmm. Grow and connect are two of mine. I know that no matter what I do to fulfill my vision and the mission that God's put me on this earth to do, I have to always do those things. There is never a time when it's like, oh, right, it makes sense to throw this out. What kind of certainty do you get when you have that? Man, this is why I said this is the most impactful thing I've done in my adult life. And by the way, we did this for our company, The Impossible Life. I do this for all the other companies that I own.
Yeah, what did this do for your company just this year?
Dude.
So, the one that I'm not in.
Yeah, the one that you're not in, I mean, exponential growth. I think we're going to end up 6Xing what we did last year. And we didn't have a bad year last year. I'll just say that. but that's what's amazing about this is because the certainty that you have, it creates really it simplifies things, and complexity is the enemy of accomplishment. So whenever you can simplify and say, hey, here's the things that we need to hone in on, here's the things that we focus on that we always do. And guess what? It's just like what your water, sun, and soil is like. And we use that example because if you want to make a plant grow, you got to have water, sun, and soil. And we all know that from a simplistic standpoint with a plant. We don't know that. We lose that a lot in our lives and in our businesses. But when you know where to focus your energy and all those and your efforts, it's amazing what can happen, man.
So I talked about 5. We've covered 4 so far.
Sir. Yep.
And I won't go deep into this one, but the last one is what's called ethos, right? And really what ethos is it's like it's the soul of a business. Mm-hmm. It's the identity of a person, right? There's what's called the SEAL ethos, and it took them a long time to write it. SEAL teams were founded in 1962, and I believe the SEAL ethos was written in the mid-2000s.
Okay.
Right? And a bunch of master chiefs all went out to San Clemente Island, which is a place that the Navy owns, and sat out there for over a month to write this. These are people who carried the identity of the SEAL teams, and then they put it into words. When I work with business organizations to help them develop their ethos, it's all these identity statements, right? Like in the SEAL ethos, it's lines like, my nation expects me to be prepared for any situation. My job demands that I have high performance. It's all these identity statements that talk, and also some of the great lines in the SEAL teams, right? Like I never quit is in there. It's all these identity statements that say this is who we are. It's all the things that when I do this work with people to develop these forces, vision, mission, values, principles, and ethos, we create a lot of copy and we write a lot of things that have meaning. And some of those things are the identity statements that end up coming into the ethos later. But again, there has to be weight behind it.
Yeah.
Right. At the end, you can have a vision, mission, values, and principles on the board that it's like, hey, these things align and this would work, but who's going to carry it? Right. Or as Goggins would say, who's going to carry the boats? Like the SEAL ethos is really what says, this is one of my favorite lines in the SEAL ethos is it says all of this is like, I'm this person and my nation expects this and America expects this. I am that man.
Yeah, I love
that.
Right?
You claim it. You said this is who I'm going to be. So it's really the epitome of everything that your company is, everything that your family is to write an ethos.
Yeah. I love that, man. So those are the 5 forces.
When you have all of those things, right? The byproduct of your 5 forces, creates great culture. When you have a clear vision, this is where we're going. This is why we demand to exist on the earth as a business. You have to give a purpose to business. God gave you a purpose as a person. You need to discover your vision. For a business, we have to author visions into them. When those things are clear, when you know this is how we're going to do it. This is my mission. I'm going to create the most compelling car. This is my mission. I'm going to teach 1,000 men how to do this. This is my mission. I'm going to serve this product to 10,000 people, right? When you know what your mission is, then you have, this is a clear direction. I don't care what happens. I don't care which way the wind blows. I don't care what's in front of me. I don't care what's behind me. I'm not running from fear. I'm not running from pain. I'm not just trying to make money and running towards pleasure. I'm driven towards purpose. Now, when you have those vision and mission, and then you add to it, and here's how I'm great. When I go through difficult times, I'll use my values to navigate these obstacles. When things are tough, principles will show me what's going to succeed and what's not going to succeed. And when you have all of that, you create an organization, you create a family, you create a team that has a culture where people want to be a part of it. Man, this guy's going somewhere. Man, this guy's not just doing stuff for himself. I think I also align to this great cause and I want to do it with him. Man, I love working with people who know why they're successful. I love working with people who stick to their values, right? These are the things that create a great culture.
Yeah. Man, that's so good. And I hope you guys understand why when you have those 5 forces and you have that culture, why we stress how important that is. Because imagine you have those things in place in your business and in your life. What kind of fruit do you think you're going to produce? You're going to have an extraordinary life that's full of adventure. It's full of meaning and purpose. Your business is going to be the kind of one that goes out there and changes the world, which is why we care so much about this.